In your book you mentioned the Angelic Wars. Does this fit in with the Pleiades?
The Angelic Wars happened a long time ago, and this is an idea which is found between the mammal and the reptile, the dual identity between the human being, the Homo sapien, sapien actually meaning to be intelligent, but we see that there is also a connection with the serpents as well. The word serpent is related to sapien, and this is because the human being was created, or is certainly the human form is associated with the reptile very profoundly, as is found within the Apocrypha traditions, and also within Genesis, in which Eve communicates and talks to the serpent. The Angelic Wars are associated, at least in part, and this is only part of a very complex puzzle, and in which there are many words and word associations and derivations, some which I trace within the murder of reality. But essentially, if we can cut it down and summarise it, and this is only a very small bit of the puzzle, there was a conflict with human beings and the Pleiades, with Cyrus, being the amphibian or the fish, and human beings fled that part of the system, and they came to Mars. So we see that there's a relationship with Adam, his name Mahadam, from Adam, literally means Mars, and is used in the Hebrew to describe Mars, Mahadim. So there's a relationship with Adam, and again Adam, his name means red. Adam in Hebrew means red. Adam literally means red earth. Adamah is earth. So the red earth, Mahadim, Mars in the Hebrew, suggests that Adam is correlated with Mars. Now, Adam's descendants were later destroyed within the floods, and his seed was taken to the moon. Hence the moon is a symbol of the priesthood. So we see within the Arabic the word Qamar is closely related to the Hebrew word Koma, meaning priest. So the insignia of the priesthood is the moon. Within the Zoroastrian traditions, it is stated specifically that the moon is a receptacle which carried the seed of man. Now, as a result of this conflict, human beings and the seed of man was nearly wiped out, but there was some kind of contract which was made between the mammal and the reptile. It's alluded to in some of the etymologies. So, for example, the word Islam means salam, which means peace or to submit. This idea of submitting and peace, or to surrender, is of a person or of a party or nation who have been conquered. So the Shab, which are a nation or a race or stock, which we can link in with the Sabi priesthood, they actually surrendered or resigned themselves, okay, and this led to peace. So we can see that there's a relationship here between the reptile and man, which is contrasted within all of the symbolism within the ancient mystery schools. It's perhaps useful also to mention Orion in this case as well, because the line between the serpent or the fish and the line between human beings was resolved with kingship and a new contract. So the kings are the mediators between heaven and earth. These mediations are continued through Parliament, which we showed was linked to the bloodline of the Shaitani, the bloodlines of the Shaitani. So there's a relationship there, and as I will show later on in this video, the children of the Nephilim are identified with Orion, and it seems that Orion is very closely grouped with the veneration of Horus and the idea of the resurrection of the king and the continuation of the king's bloodline.
How does Adam fit into the split within the priesthood? Could you give some background information on Adam?
As we said before, Adam is connected to the planet Mars, so Mahadim means Mars. In the Hebrew, Mi Adam or Me Adam would mean from Adam. So Adam is derived, or his bloodline is derived from Mars, and we can see the relationship there also with the etymology of the word. So Adam in Hebrew means red, Adamah is earth. The implication of Adam's name is the red earth. So Adam is from Mars. We find such relationships or analogies also within the Latin language as well. So in the Latin, the word mammals is Mars. This is where we get the word mammal from, and mother. So the relationship there is of the mammal. Now traditionally, in the Roman pantheon, Mars is linked into conflict because Mars is the god of conflict. And we find this also within the Hebrew and Arabic. The word Adam in the Arabic, when it's pronounced with a slightly different inflection, Hadam, it means actually annihilation. So the descendants of Adam were annihilated, and the bloodline of Adam was taken to the moon. Now we see that there's a very close relationship between the progeny of Adam and Orion. So, for example, in the Semitic languages, there's a very close relationship between the ch sound and the h sound. So we see that there are natural puns with the kh, the h and the a sound. So for example, Adam is punned with kadam, which means east. Now when we transfer this into the Latin language, we get the word Orions, which means east. Orions is where we get the word Orion from. Now Orion is connected, or can be symbolized as Ryan, or a lion, which is a symbol of the priesthood. And it's useful here to say that the Levites themselves, the word Lev, meaning heart, is a symbol of the priesthood, and this interconnects in the Greek with the word cardinal, which comes from the Greek word cardia, heart. So the cardinals themselves, they trace their bloodline directly back to the Levites. Now the Levites represented themselves with the lion, which is lav in Hebrew, meaning a lion. So there's a very close relationship there. And there's a switch also with the L and the R. So we see the Levites are closely grouped with the rabbis, the V and the B switching as well, so the Levites and the rabbis. Now the rabbis use inverse symbolism. So here their name is derived from Rab, the Syrian word for the West. So the rabbis are connected to the Western priesthood. So we see that there is instantly a split, if you like. The Levites represent themselves with the Lion of Judah. I argue in my book that the Lion of Judah is another symbol of the Caucasian priesthood. So for example, the original tribe of Israel goes back to the tribe of Asher. Now Asher in the Arabic, in the Egyptian Arabic, means blonde, so this was a Caucasian bloodline, and the implications for this are found all over within the symbolism. So for example, we see that Jesus is typically defined, is typically represented with fair hair, usually a red beard and blue eyes and pale skin, but we find also within the traditions of the Hadith as well that Muhammad himself is described as having a pale skin and a red beard. In some of the earliest commentaries within the Turkish editions of the Quran, Moses is described as having a ruddy beard. These are all references to the Theban priesthood and the symbol of the fox, which we identified earlier is connected to the student Taliba, a student, and Ta'alib, which in the Arabic is a fox. Now the fox hieroglyph is used to write Mass, which is a descendant of the Pharaoh. In the Greek, the word Moses means a descendant and is connected to the priesthood of Moses. So we can see how all these symbols are very closely interrelated, and how they work on a number of reverse symbols and symbols which reiterate and clarify other symbols.
Are you saying that Adam and his genealogy are identified with the star system Orion and in our solar system the planet Mars? Maybe here you could give a summary of Adam's fall and how this fits in with what you describe as the Angelic Wars.
Right, I think here what we need to do is go back to Thebes and the traditions of Thebes. The Theban priesthood traced its genealogy back to the first man, Kadmos. This is a Greek word, but it is found, or is a derivation from the Hebrew word kadam, meaning the ancient, or kadam, which means east. So Kadmos is translated usually as the eastern one or the ancient one. Now its bloodline is traced back to Orion, because as we said earlier, Kadam meaning east, is connected in the Latin to Orions, which means east, and is another derivation of the word Orions. So the ancient one, or the eastern one, specifically refers to Orion. Now Horus, the deity Horus, the hunter, is the name Horus, Ka, refers in the Sumerian language to an angel, a king, or a hunter. He is found or associated with the star system Orion. And again, within the Greek traditions, there is this there is this relationship between the star system Orion and the hunter. In the Greek traditions, Orion is depicted as a hunter. In the Egyptian traditions, the hunter is a reference to Horus. So Kadmos is the first descendant of Thebes, and Kadmos is another word for the ancient one or the eastern one. Now Kadmos is grouped in the Greek with Kadmia, meaning the earth. Kadmia is derived from the Hebrew etymology Adam. As we said before, there's a very close relationship between the ch and the h sound, which is often interchanged within the Greek, the Arabic and the Hebrew. So Kadmia, the earth, is derived from Adam, which means the earth, Adamah in the Hebrew, or Adam, which means red. So the traditions of Kadmos, the eastern one, go all the way back to the star system Orion. Now the colour red is also associated with Mars. So we can see that the ancients believed that the populations from Orion, or that the genealogy of the king, which is identified with the star system Orion, is very closely grouped with the first man Adam and with the planet Mars. This originally linked into the idea of the Angelic Wars and the division between man and angel, and then the establishment of the government, of the monarchy, and of the contract, which contracted man to the angel, and which contracted man in terms of laws in between the upper and the lower house.
You also describe Adam as a neophyte or a servant. Could you expand upon this, and how his title in the ancient world is conjugal to the human angelic lineage?
Yeah, okay, well, we'll split this question into two parts. First of all, there's a direct correspondence with Adam and the servant, Kadam or Kadami, which means service or to serve. So we see that there's a relationship in the Semitic languages with Adam as a servant. Now, this is obviously connected to, in the Greek, Kadmia, which means soil, a derivation from the Hebrew word Adamah, which means the earth, or connotes the red earth. So there's a relationship with the servant. Now, in the Greek language, we also get the word neophyte. Neophyte literally means neophytus, the newly planted. This goes back to the traditions of Kadmos. In the traditions of Kadmos, Kadmos planted the seeds of the serpent and established the first people of Thebes. Now, hieroglyphically, the tooth is very reminiscent of the glyph used to write this, the star constellation Sirius. So, esoterically, we see that there's a relationship between the newly planted, which were the new people, or Adam, which were planted which were planted from a different star system and which were planted on the earth, and they were created as servants, and we see that there's a relationship additionally with Kadam East, which was the star system Orion. Orion was linked with the human angelic bloodline and the monarchical bloodline, which was a product of the human angelic bloodline. So we can see that there are many different esoteric signifiers which build up a very complex history, which is encoded within the words themselves. I think here it's worth also pointing out the relationship between the neophyte, the newly planted, and the traditions found within Catholicism. So, for example, a training college for priests and rabbis is referred to as a seminary. This in itself is a word which comes from the word seminarium, which means of seed plot. The seed plot specifically connotes the neophyte. And as we can see, the seminarium is also connected to the Greek word semele, which was the Greek moon goddess. Her progeny are descended from Cadmus and Bacchus. So, Semele, the moon goddess, the daughter of Cadmus, and she was the mother of Bacchus, is connected to the Neophyte. In the Syrian language, Kisera, which means sown, is punned with the word Khazar. Khazar means is the Hebrew word for an alien or a star visitor. Literally, it means a visitor from the stars or a star alien. So we see that the Kisera, the sown, or the Kadam, which are all words which derive from Adam, are connected to the plantation of the human seed and the bloodline, and additionally to the monarchical bloodlines, which are identified with Kadam, meaning east, or Orions, or Orion.
In your book, The Murder of Reality, you demonstrate a correlation between the constellation Orion and Nephilim. Could you explain?
Yes, so again we have to go back to the word plays to have a full understanding of who and what the Nephilim are. The word Nephil, the Hebrew word, means to fall. And again we see a relationship with the serpent, because the Arabic word Afa, to fall, is related to Afa, a serpent. So the fallen progeny, or their fallen offspring, is connected to the serpent. Now in addition, Nephil is punned with Nephil, which means a giant. So the Nephilim are the giants of old. Okay, so we see there that there's a relationship with the giants. Now when we go into the Greek language, the word translates as Titan, because the Titans were the giants. But there are additional words which can help us here as well. So for example, the Nephilim are described as the children of Anak. Now, as we said earlier, Nephil means a giant, but in the Hebrew, Anak also means a giant. Anaki means gigantic. So the Anunnaki are a race which are described as giant-like. Now this is cryptic. This does not literally mean that the race was giant, although the race may have been taller than the average person. This is referring to the star system Orion, because the Arabic word for the star Orion is Gibborim, or Gibbor. The Gibborim were the people of Orion, and Gibbor literally means gigantic. So in the Bible we have references to the Anunnaki, we have references to the Nephilim, the Gibborim. These are all references to the giants, and these are cryptic references to the star system Orion, referred to as Gibbor, in the Greek Titan. Now this is interesting because the word Titan in the Greek is closely matched with Tatan, which is the Greek word for Satan. So we can see, and the translation of Satan comes from the verbal stem to oppose or an adversary. So we see instantly that there is the idea of conflict which is associated with the fallen, or the Nephilim, or the progeny of the serpent. This fall originally, mythologically, was identified with human angelic intercourse between the serpent and between human beings. As I mentioned earlier, this created a division between the two groups and resulted in a contract. The progeny of the Nephilim are grouped with Earth, but are also connected to Mars and to the first descendants Adam, which is aligned to the servant or the Neophyte, which are the newly planted, in addition to the line of the kings, which were represented by the cobra, which was a motif of the Theban priesthood.
Are the Nephilim genetically related to the Anunnaki? And what does the name Anunnaki mean?
The Nephilim is from the word Nephil, which means giant, and they were the children of Anak. Anak literally means giant. Anaki means gigantic. These are words for the Titan, which are found within the Greek mythology. I mentioned before that the Arabic word for Orion literally means giant. Gibbor means giant, and again is a star system which is connected to the children of the stars, the Gibborim. which were the children from Orion, otherwise the Nephilim, or the mixed progeny between Eve and the serpent. Now, the Anunnaki, there are other interesting word plays here as well, because in the Syrian word, al-nakal means the transported, so anu-nakal means transported from heaven. Now, within the Jewish calendar, you also have the festivities Hanukkah. Hanukkah means consecrated, but is coming from the word Hanika, which means the marriage. The marriage here refers to a royal or a divine marriage between a demigod and a human being, or between the Nephilim and the humans, as is cited in the Bible, between the marriage between the Nephilim and humans. So Hanukkah celebrates the marriage with the Anunnaki. So we see with the Anunnaki or the Anaki a relationship also with European etymologies as well. So, for example, Nikor is a water monster, and Nickel refers to a goblin. In addition, we find that we get the Greek word Nyx, which is a water siren. Now, all these words themselves are grouped originally with the Hebrew word Nakal, which is a river, and Nakash, which is a serpent. So there is a very strong connection here between water, or the amphibian, which is sometimes represented as the fish, and the idea of the Nephilim, or the giants, which are connected to the star system Orion. As I said earlier, the implication is that human beings, which originally were associated or grouped with the Pleiades, had a war or a conflict with the amphibian beings from Sirius. This was resolved with the line of kings, or the monarchical lineage of the king, which was identified both with the first man and also with Orion's and Mars, and then with human progeny, which followed later. Yeah, a point which is worth mentioning is that rabbinical scholars sometimes translate the name Anunnaki as the long-necked ones. This originates from the Hebrew-Arabic word, the Arabic word unk, which is a neck, and arok, which is long. Sometimes the word is also rendered as the long necklace ones, which would be arok nukrai. The long-necked ones are obviously a reference to the serpent, because the serpent has a long neck. And we see, as we said earlier, that there is a close relationship between the Nephilim and the serpent, with the word plays which we find. So, for example, Naphel, which is fallen, punned with Naphel, which is the giants, or the fallen giants. We can see that there's a relationship with Hafa, which is the word to fall, and the word Afa, which is the Arabic word for a viper. So the fallen ones are associated with the Nephilim, which are the progeny of the Titans in the Greek traditions, and as we mentioned earlier, that is an etymon which is very closely aligned to Tatan, who is Satan, and these are all personified or represented as the dragon, which is an insignia which is continued and carried through the traditions of the Theban priesthood, and the traditions of Kadmos, who was described as the first, or the ancestral man, which in itself is a word group or family of words which is related to the servant, to the Neophyte, to Orion, and also to the first bloodline of Adam, and the bloodline which was directly associated in our solar system with the planet Mars.
A figure which keeps on occurring in the classical world is the deity Oannes. Can you give a little background information on Oannes?
This is a Babylonian deity, and his name is connected to the reptile and to the rapist. We see that there's a very close relationship with Oannes and the Hebrew word Anan, cloud. But his name is specifically from the word Oannes, which is to rape, and Anas, which means a rapist. So he's described as the divine rapist, and indeed the Aramaic word Anas means grace. So we can see that there's an idea, or conceptually there's an idea between the reptile, which is understood as or personified as a rapist, and is linked into ideas of grace or divine conception or inception, particularly between the human angelic bloodline. Within the Latin also we see that there's a direct or a specific correlation between the reptile, which in the Latin is rapier, and rapier, which means to rape or to pillage. Now in the biblical and in the apocrypha traditions, the rapists were referred to as the Awim. The word Awim also translates as the serpent. So we see very clearly that there's a relationship between the reptile. In the Babylonian tradition this is depicted as a fish, but in the Latin traditions we see that the reptile is sometimes depicted as a dragon or a reptile, and the rapist. Later on in the DVD I will show that there is actually a correlation between the rapist and the reaper, and the reaper is connected to fertility rites and the festivals which are associated with the harvest.